Welcome back. This is going to be part three of this mid-year series where we're moving through with our dreams, our goals, learning what still matters as we move into this midlife stage where we're in this transitory place, right? In part one, we got honest about what's working, what's not working, what's worth reigniting in this season of our lives. And then in part two, we talked about what's kind of been holding you back from just getting started, and how to finally take those micro steps moving forward with your purpose. So today, we're going to talk about what happens in the middle, in that messy middle, okay? That moment when your big goal doesn't really feel exciting anymore, when your calendar, it fills back up, when your energy is tapped out, right? When you kind of start wondering, even if anybody's even going to notice if you quit or if you just stop, okay? And I want you to know they do, all right? But you were meant for this thing, to launch this thing, to share this thing. And so the dishes, the meetings, the dentist appointments, all that mental clutter of life, it makes it way too easy to put it off again. And so now you might be wondering, why do I always stall out here? Or maybe I'm not cut out to do this. And I'm going to tell you, those are thoughts that I have had multiple times as I have built Making Life Beautiful again. The pure volume of learning technical things to do live streams and all of that. But I want to tell you something. You don't have to feel perfectly ready to be able to finish something, right? You just have to stay willing, and just keep moving forward. And this isn't about hustle. It's really about finding that inner grit that is needed to be able to keep moving forward. So if you've started something really good, something you believe that God has asked you to do, but you're feeling tired, distracted, or doubtful about it, today's the day that we get to talk about how to finish anyway, even at processing through all of those emotions. So here's the truth that doesn't get talked about often enough, I believe. Starting, it gets really exciting. We all love it, right? That's where we have this idea and then we can't wait to get started and we start and it's exciting. But then finishing, that also has this satisfaction to it, but that middle, this is where people really want to quit. It's the hard part where you got to push through things that are broken or not working, right? And again, it's not really about um not caring about your dream anymore, but that's where this messy middle, we don't know what to do with it. You finally sit down to start working on that goal and get started, and then you have a kid who needs help with a school project, or you block out your time to write, to plan, to record, whatever it is, but by the time you have finished your dinner and your laundry, your brain is so tired you have nothing left. And then you have momentum, and then your body, you have a health crisis and you get sick, or your job, it's demanding more of you, and you just get hit with this wall of emotion, right? And suddenly you start telling yourself stories I'm just not disciplined enough. This always happens. I always do this. I start and then I quit. I should probably just let this go. And, I want to gently interrupt that spiral of cycle of stories, because you are not the problem. Your process might need a little tweaking, but you are still wildly capable of what God has called you to do. He wouldn't have called you to it if he didn't mean it, right? Or if he didn't give you what you needed to be able to get through that messy middle. And so this part, that messy, awkward, the not so cute parts, right? It's where growth happens, right? It's where God refines your story and your why, and he adds to it. It's where you learn what perseverance actually feels like. And so I'll be totally honest. It's also where the enemy likes to whisper in your ear and say things like, see, told you this wouldn't work. Okay, so you have this place where you really have to know what you're going to allow those stories to tell, because the enemy knows something really powerful, that if he can keep you stalled out and stop you from finishing, he can keep you from that testimony that speaks louder than your fear. That power of the testimony, the Bible talks about it, right? When you share your testimony and someone believes it, and then they take on the identity of, well, if they could do it, then I can do it. We become unstoppable because a community comes together and we become stronger than if we were standing by ourselves. Okay. So if you've ever been tempted to shelf that dream again because you hit resistance, just don't let yourself get off track. You're just in the middle. Okay. Recognize you're just in the middle. So the beginning, it's exciting. The finishing will be very satisfying. You just have to keep those wheels turning, right? Not in your own strength, but in staying anchored in your purpose and committed to that, just one step at a time, those micro steps towards that bigger audacious goal. So let's go ahead and, flip the script a little bit and talk about, you might think that people who finish these really big goals, the ones who are publishing the books and launching their businesses and running the marathons, right, are somehow more confident or qualified than you are. But I want to tell you this, most of them are not. They just know how to keep going when when the process is no longer exciting, right? They've learned how to finish anyway in the middle of the mess and the mundane. So what does that look like for us? Okay, here's what I want you to, when you've got the scripting of stories, here's how you're going to reframe them, right? Finishing isn't about an endless enthusiasm. It's about keeping your eyes on why this still matters, right? That's going to be the fuel, the wind in your sails. Okay. The other thing you can think about is it's not about waiting for this perfect time. It's about showing up during your real life and doing just the next small thing. And these small things may feel insignificant, but they really are significant because they all pile up. Okay. And then it's also not about having all of the answers. It's about trusting the God who gave you this assignment in the first place to know what the next step is and reveal it when his timing's right. Okay. So let's talk about like what you're really building because it really matters deeply, right? And the world doesn't need a polished version of your story. It needs the real one because the one they're going to relate and connect to is that messy middle one, right? And so sometimes it's your process that will be the breakthrough for someone else that you've been praying for, okay? So don't wait until it's flawless. Like don't keep holding back until it's perfect. I want you to release it, share it, start talking about it today, okay? Because what you carry is meant to shift atmospheres, right? And inspire others to also do that and to rise up, right? So when you rise the tide for all of us, okay? That's how significant of what your goal and purpose and dream that the Lord's called you to matters. So let's go ahead and be real. Like starting, it's hard, and continuing though, like this is a completely different battle. This is the part where all that excitement's worn off, the part where you've already told people that you're doing this thing, and now you feel the weight of needing to follow through. And so the example I share with you is like a couple weeks ago, I shared with you I am going to start this course, and it was really scary when I had to say, I didn't get across that finish line, for circumstances outside of my own. But it's really okay, right? When you're knee deep in life, it's really okay to not necessarily follow through right away when you think they're expecting it, right? Because this dream that has your heart racing, it now has to compete with grocery lists, doctor's appointments, late night emails, unexpected chaos, deaths in the family, sick children. And so some days your motivation for it is going to be missing in action, like total reality here. And it's not that you stop believing in it, right? But it's just walking it out. It takes more stamina than you expect, right? Especially when the results don't show up as fast as all the effort that you think you're investing should show, right? And so that's not a sign to quit. It's actually a sign to simplify. And so, I'm going to break down a couple ways to do that. The first one, I said it last week, but it's so good, it's worth repeating here, right? And that is to break that goal into micro sessions or missions, right? Think bite-sized little steps towards that big audacious goal. You're not going to try to write that whole book, but maybe write 200 words. You're not necessarily going to launch the podcast all at once, but you're going to focus on maybe some 3 ideas for an episode. But you're not going to overhaul your entire life all at once. So what you may need to think through is like, I just want to organize this one drawer. And so momentum, it builds when those steps are small enough to actually take those steps, right? Here's another way is to build a rhythm, not necessarily a plan. So, and the reason why I say that is because plans can often be disrupted, right? So when you have a rhythm in place, though, they flow and they recover when things happen. And so your rhythm, it doesn't have to be rigid like plans are. That's what I'm trying to say here. But maybe it looks like you just saying, I'm going to take 20 quiet minutes with the Lord on this project before the house wakes up. And so you don't have to say it's at 7 o'clock every morning, right? It has this fluidity to it, and you just put it in at the best space for your day. That's how you're going to fit this into your real life. Another way that some people like to do this is batching. So like if you're trying to write a book as your big goal, you might want to batch some of your writing on Saturday mornings, right? When a lot of your family still sleeps in a little bit, or Sunday mornings before everybody's gotten up to get ready for church. And then, what you're going to do is you're going to let your routine support your dream and not let your routine strangle it. And that's the big key here, right? The goal here is to create a steady hum of progress, right? One that's just going to fit into the season of life that you're in right now today. Okay. Another thing that you can do is make sure that you're not isolating yourself. Last week I talked about building a cheer squad, but this is a little bit different. I want you to build a finish line team. Okay. So this is only going to be for 1 or 2 people in your life, right? You don't need a huge team of people. And so these are not just cheerleaders, and you need your cheerleaders. We talked about that last week, but these are the people who will nudge you when you want to stall out and stop. And these people are going to remind you of your why, of who you are, keeping you sparked. They're going to speak life when you're second guessing everything so that this dream doesn't die. Because you weren't meant to finish this race alone. A few years ago, I decided to run a half marathon. My sister talked me into it. And Jonathan also decided to join. And I had trained and I'd put in all the miles of training. I had shaved off my time of my own pace, right? I was in this rhythm. And I actually was enjoying running, believe it or not. And so when it got to race day, I was really, really doing great. I got to about mile 10 though, and I got a phone call. So I stepped aside to take this phone call, and it lasted about maybe 2 minutes, maybe not even 2 minutes. But what I didn't realize is because in all my training, I never had stopped. So what I didn't realize was that those 2 minutes were enough for my muscles to cool down and my adrenaline to stop. So the next 3 miles of this half marathon ended up being totally brutal. And by the time I made it into that last mile, I was actually crying. The pain was it just hurt so bad, right? My hips, my ankles, my knees. I was actually limping, barely making it along. And honestly, I wasn't even sure that I was going to finish. I was kind of thinking like, maybe I'll sideline and stand off to the side. But here's the cool part, okay? I didn't know that I had a finish line team until I saw ahead. Jonathan, who had already finished the race, had decided to come back, and he brought my dad with him. Okay. They each took an arm and they walked me across that finish line in that last, I don't know, quarter mile, half mile, whatever it was. So when I was crumbling, they carried me through, right? And so that day I might not have actually finished without them, and that is reality. They didn't cheer me on from the sidelines, though. I had a couple of people doing that as well, but they showed up right in the middle of my pain, of my suffering, and made sure that I did not give up. And so hopefully that story will help you define the difference between a cheer squad who's standing on the sidelines because you need those, and then having a finish line team, because you really need people like that who will walk beside you, especially when that thing you're building feels heavier than you expected, right? And so again, I want to remind you, you don't need a crowd. In fact, that might cause complications, but just a few who will hold your arms up when you're tired and say, you're not stopping here, let's finish this together. And, and there's an example in the Bible, right? Moses, he needed people to hold his arms up, okay? And then another thing that is really, really important here is to celebrate the obedience, not necessarily just the outcomes, right? So finish doesn't mean perfect. And so a lot of people feel like they can't celebrate because it wasn't perfect. And so when it's not shiny, it's not polished, you didn't go viral, right? It means you stayed faithful to the assignment, right? Even when it was hard. So that's why we're celebrating at the PJ party Saturday, August 2nd, a year of these live streams. They weren't perfect, they weren't polished. I haven't built this big, huge organization of women, but I have stayed faithful to the assignment. And you guys have been there with me, right? So God, here's the cool part. God's not grading you on your metrics. He's literally just watching your yes and going, that's my girl. Okay. And so I want to share something personal with you here, because before these live streams, I actually spent 2 full years working with business coaches. I was dreaming, strategizing, building outlines, brand boards, spreadsheets, all the things. And I told everyone I was launching Making Life Beautiful again. I had notebooks full of vision, programs, step by step, things that my coaches had suggested. And here's the crazy part. At the end of those 2 years, I had no website, no product, no live streams. I just still had that heavy weight of pressure and guilt because I had talked about this dream so much, but I still hadn't finished anything. I still hadn't gotten anywhere, right? And here's what's neat and where it all kind of changed. I realized I wasn't needing to chase a perfect product. I was getting to carry purpose. And that's where it all changed. When I shifted in my mindset that I'm not trying to be perfect, I'm just trying to show up with purpose. And so if I didn't start showing up messy and imperfect, still figuring it out, I'd miss out. The lives that God wanted me to impact through the power of my testimony, and every time I get an email from one of you guys, every time you share how these live streams have helped you feel seen or known or called, that fuels me to keep going. Right? To keep showing up, to keep being obedient, even when it really feels very vulnerable, sharing all of these stories, right? But no matter how long this has taken or how unpolished it is, the cool thing is if God is asking you to do it, it's time to start, and it's time to get moving, get through that messy middle and cross over that finish line, right? Because the world doesn't need another perfect product, right? Another perfect curated success story. Right? In fact, the algorithms now are showing people don't want that. So it needs your real in process testimony. So you may not even have gotten to the full end of the end results yet, right? The thing that people will love is when they get to see you walking in that faithfulness in the middle and seeing what that actually will look like, right? Because again, when you rise, you help everyone rise. I know that you're not someone who gives up easily, right? And you actually care deeply. I've had several conversations with a lot of you. And even if this dream has taken longer than expected, you're still leaning in. And that is cool because your dream, it matters. And you don't have to have this perfect finish. You just need to be faithful in your yes. And so next week, we're going to be diving into something totally super practical to help you with this. And that is time management. Not in a very hustle, kind of like wake up at 5 a.m. kind of way, though. We're going to be talking about those rhythms that actually work for your real life so that you can stick through that messy middle and finish strong. And so don't forget to go grab that workbook for this week that goes with this episode, because it's full of prompts to help you move from that stuck place into that steady rhythm of the middle. And hey, again, don't forget that about that PJ party coming up Saturday, August 2nd, 9 a.m. Central Time, on Zoom. We'll be sending out that link the day before if you're on the newsletter or if you're in the Facebook group. So make sure to bring your coffee, bring your messy bun, bring a friend, whatever you wanted to bring. And we're just going to totally talk about where you're at, cheer each other on, maybe even do face exercises together, right? So make sure you go check the Facebook group for that Zoom link, and I'll see you there.